She discovered a mysterious dragon egg. What emerged transformed her entire future. A mechanic found a lost dragon egg drifting in space. What hatched from it rewrote everything she thought she knew about life, the universe, and her own future. Before we dive into this sci-fi story, drop a hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps the channel grow and lets the algorithm know you like space dragon stories like this. The air in the repair bay tasted like old machine oil and ozone. The overhead lights buzzed faintly as they flickered in a restless rhythm, illuminating rows of half-dismantled engines and hovering tools. Megan Brooks stood elbow-deep in the open guts of an aging atmospheric skimmer, grease smeared across her knuckles like permanent tattoos. Every so often, a wrench tapped metal or a diagnostic scanner beeped in quiet annoyance, but otherwise the bay on New Horizon Station was almost peaceful. New Horizon wasn't the glamorous edge of the galaxy. It was a giant, circular skeleton of steel and composite, orbiting the swirling gas giant known as Proan 4. Out here on this far-flung orbital station, everything revolved around one thing: maintenance. Hull plating wore thin. Shields glitched. Pumps failed. Air filters clogged. Even people eventually broke down. It was the never-ending job of techs like Megan to keep everything patched together long enough for someone else to call it stable. At 32, Megan had built a reputation across the station's maintenance decks. She took on the repairs other mechanics refused, the "don't tell command I did this" kind of work. The dangerous calls in half-power corridors. The glitches in abandoned sections where the lights worked only half the time, and strange echoes weren't always just air through vents. She liked the challenge, but lately even that had begun to feel routine. Fix this, weld that, recalibrate those coils. Repeat until the heat death of the universe. She snapped the skimmer's engine housing shut with a solid, satisfying clang and checked the time on her wrist display. 3 hours until she was supposed to meet a freighter captain at one of the outer maintenance airlocks. Just enough time to pack her best tools and grab something that vaguely resembled food from the station's sad excuse for a commissary. Captain Reeves had pinged her directly instead of submitting an official work order, and that alone made her raise an eyebrow. He ran the Galatea, a mid-sized cargo hauler that ferried hydrogen and supplies between Proan 4 and the scattered colonies further out. The man prided himself on clean logs and no surprises. So when someone like that sent a scrambled, nervous message along the lines of "something attached itself to my hull, and I don't know what it is," Megan paid attention. Reeves had reported an object fused to a ship's exterior after a skim through the upper atmosphere of the gas giant. His sensor log said it wasn't metal, wasn't rock, and certainly wasn't any standard space junk. It generated its own heat in vacuum, and the readings hinted at a rhythmic fluctuation that had reminded the crew of a heartbeat. That was what made him call her. Not station science, not security, her. She tugged off her gloves and wiped her hands on a rag already stained beyond hope. 8 years on New Horizon meant she'd seen some strange things. Uncatalogued microorganisms hitching rides on frozen debris. Weird magnetic phenomena. Once a glowing filament in the waste reclamation system that probably could have been classified as life if anyone had bothered to fill out a research request instead of just flushing it. But something about Reeves' voice, tight and afraid under his practice calm, had stuck with her. One anomaly at docking ring 7. "Outer maintenance lock," she muttered, slinging her tool bag over one shoulder. "You just had to make my week interesting, Reeves." The walk to ring 7 took her through progressively quieter parts of the station. The main habitat ring still hummed with life. The murmur of crowds, the hiss of recycled air, the faint thrum of distant engines. But by the time she reached the maintenance levels, that noise dimmed to the occasional rattle of pipes and the hollow clang of her own boots. The airlock Reeves had chosen technically belonged to the emergency repairs only category, the kind of place used when a ship rolled in with a hull breach or a thruster failure. Unofficially, it was where people brought problems they didn't want on record. Megan stepped around a flickering warning holosign and spotted Reeves pacing in front of the huge circular hatch. He was shorter than she remembered, Or maybe he just aged into his stocky frame. His face looked permanently windburned, which made no sense for a man who lived in pressurized environments. And today his cheeks were flushed even more than usual. When he saw her, he straightened a little, like a kid pretending he hadn't just been caught worrying himself sick. "Brooks," he grunted, giving her a tight nod. "Appreciate you coming. You said you've got something stuck to your ship that isn't in any manual," Megan said, skipping small talk. "Is it affecting your systems, or just your peace of mind?" Reeves scanned the corridor, making sure they were alone, then leaned closer. "Ship's fine. No damage, no leaks, no alarms. It's just this isn't space debris. It's not anything." His voice dropped to a rough whisper. "It feels alive. Alive." Megan raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're not just hearing the reactor fans again?" He bristled. "I've been spacefaring for 23 years. I know the difference between a vibration from a pump and something that pulses like a heartbeat. You'll see." He punched in his access code, and the massive hatch rolled aside with a long hiss as pressure equalized. Inside was a narrow chamber with racks of EVA suits hanging like empty skins. Megan stepped up to a locker, pulled down the suit she kept stored in this section, a beaten-up, heavily modified model that station regs would have frowned at, and started climbing in. "Captain," she said as she locked her helmet in place and checked her seals, "before I go dancing across your hull, I need to know if I'm about to get irradiated, dissolved, or eaten." "We scanned it every way we could," Reeves replied, fumbling with his own helmet. His hands shook just a little, and that did more to convince her he was scared than anything he'd said so far. No dangerous radiation spikes, just that heat source and that rhythm. The outer airlock door slid open, revealing the cold, familiar vastness of space. Beyond the protective field of the station's shield emitters, the stars looked sharper, harsher. The Galatea was tethered to the maintenance frame like a metal whale hooked to a dock, her hull covered in scars from micrometeorites and years of travel. Panels of different alloys quilted her exterior, patched and repatched over time. "There," Reeves pointed using his suit's external arm light, aiming the beam toward the ship's underside. "Port side, just behind the secondary thrusters." Megan activated the zoom on her helmet display. At first, all she saw was the usual clutter of conduits, panels, and piping. Then her gaze caught on something that didn't belong, a lump protruding from the hull, the size of a cargo crate, irregular and strange. It wasn't welded on. It looked grown. "Okay," she said slowly. "That's new." She clipped her tether to the rail and gave Reeves a short nod. "If I start screaming, cut my line and fly like hell." "Comforting," he muttered, but she could hear faint relief in his tone. Someone else was finally sharing the weird. Megan pushed off from the airlock, drifting in a clean arc toward the freighter's belly. The station's lights glimmered behind her, but ahead, the ship's metal skin filled her view. As she pulled herself closer with small bursts from her maneuvering thrusters, her suit's sensors began pinging. "There's your heat source," she reported. "About 10 degrees warmer than the hull. Stable. No obvious radiation spiking beyond background. No corrosive leaks." "That's odd." When she reached the anomaly, she reached out a gloved hand and brushed its surface. Surprised, she froze. It didn't feel like metal. Under her glove, the texture was layered, almost like overlapping plates. In her helmet lights, faint colors shimmered, deep blues, ghostly purples, and tiny flecks of gold that shifted as she moved. The material looked somewhere between crystal, scale, and polished stone, but her tools read it as neither. Megan pressed a scanner against it and let the device hum through its analysis cycles. "Composition unknown," the display mocked. "Density gradient. Hollow core. Something like a semi-permeable shell. Thermal gradient consistent with internal heat source. Structural patterns suggests." She broke off as a thump vibrated through her hand. Not from the ship, from the object itself. There. Again. A steady, unmistakable throb from within. Her breath caught. "Reeves," she said quietly, "you're not going to like this." "So don't start with that," he answered. "What is it?" She hesitated, then said the only word that fit. "It's reading like an egg." Silence filled the comm channel for several long heartbeats. All Megan could hear was her own breathing and the faint hum of her suit systems. An egg, Reeves repeated finally. As in, something is inside, and eventually it's going to want out. That's how eggs usually work, she replied dryly. The scans show a shell layer with a denser core. Internal heat, rhythmic movement. If it's not an egg, it's the best impression of one I've ever seen. But that makes no sense, Reeves argued. What kind of living thing lays eggs in the upper atmosphere of a gas giant and then lets them drift into space? Nothing in our database, Megan said, which is the fun part. As if it had heard them, the egg pulsed harder, the vibration traveling through her glove and upper arm. For a second, the fused region between the hull and the object glowed faint blue. Okay, that's new, she muttered. It's reacting to something. Maybe to me poking at it. Maybe to being hauled out of Pro and IV's clouds. When exactly did you pick this up? 53 hours ago, Reeves said. It's grown since then. I'd swear it was smaller when we first saw it, and the pulse was weaker. If it was growing, then it was developing, which meant it wasn't just some random anomaly stuck in the gray area between biology and geology. Megan's stomach fluttered with a mix of worry and pure scientific greed. We can't leave this thing glued to your hull, she decided. If it hatches out here, it could tear a hole in your ship or decide your fuel lines are a snack. I'm detaching it and bringing it into containment. You know, Command is going to have a meltdown if you drag some unknown alien egg inside their nice safe station, Reeves warned. Who said anything about telling Command? Megan replied. About a private work area in the old hazardous materials wing. Fully sealed, independent life support. If anything goes wrong, we lock it down and pretend nothing ever happened. Reeves sighed. If anyone asks, I never saw you. The Galatea left dock with nothing but standard scratches. Deal, Megan said, already pulling a specialized cutting tool from her kit. The egg did not want to let go of the ship. Whatever mechanism had fused it to the hull clung like stubborn root systems. As she carefully sliced and pried with a combination of energy cutters and microscopic lever tools, the pulsing sped up, echoing faster against her palms. The shell's colors brightened, shimmering with every movement. Easy, she murmured, as if talking to a frightened animal. I'm trying not to crack you open out here. After nearly an hour of delicate work, one last cable-like tendril finally gave way. The object floated free, spinning slowly in the dark like some glittering piece of living art. Up close, without the hull as a backdrop, the egg was even more stunning. About a meter long, slightly elongated, its shell was covered in overlapping, scale-like plates that seemed to ripple slowly with each pulse from within. Tiny currents of light flowed along those plates, like bioluminescence trapped in crystal. You're coming with me, Megan said softly. She opened a reinforced containment bag, a flexible, transparent pod designed originally for hauling hazardous biotech samples, and carefully guided the egg inside. The pulsing continued, steady and insistent, as she sealed the bag and clipped it to her harness. Object secured, she reported. Hull damage minimal. You're clear to leave once I'm back in the lock, Captain. Good, Reeves said, relief plain in his voice. Brooks, whatever that thing is, I don't want to know. And if anyone asks, we never had this conversation. Understood, she answered, as she drifted back toward the station with the mysterious egg tugging gently at her harness. Megan felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Genuine excitement. Not the small thrill of fixing an impossible engine problem, but the dizzy, breathless sense that she was standing on the edge of something big and unknown. She had no idea yet that the something inside that egg would soon be looking back at her with intelligent eyes. No idea that a mechanic in a forgotten corner of space was about to become the axis around which an entirely new future would turn. The old hazardous materials wing of New Horizon had been shut down years ago, pushed aside when budget cuts and newer tech made it redundant. Officially, those corridors were sealed. Unofficially, they'd become Megan's private kingdom. Maintenance Sector 12B still had working bulkheads, backup generators, and independent life support. Someone had simply decided it was cheaper to lock the doors, then strip it all down. Megan, being the kind of person who mapped forgotten places for fun, had found a side access panel, rerouted a few permissions, and claimed the space as her off-the-books workshop. Now, the lights flicked on as she stepped through the hatch, the door sealing behind her with a reassuring hiss. The containment bag holding the egg floated at her side, its surface softly lit by the gentle glow inside. "Welcome to my little secret," she told it as if it could understand. "Not much, but it's home." Her private lab looked like someone had dropped a standard maintenance bay, a science lab, and a junkyard into a blender and hit pulse. Workbenches lined the walls, covered in engine parts, half-built devices, and experimental tools whose safety manuals existed only in her imagination. Cables snaked along the ceiling. A small diagnostic station hummed quietly in the corner, still awake from its last use. Megan set the containment pod on the main bench and unsealed the outer layer, letting the egg rest directly on the cushioned surface underneath. Its colors brightened in the workshop lights. Up close, the intricate pattern of scales was almost hypnotic, each overlapping plate contributing to a complex, organic mosaic. "Okay," she said, powering up a bank of scanners. "Let's figure out what you are before you explode into something that eats wiring." Thermal imaging showed that the interior temperature remained steady at just under 40 degrees Celsius, warm, but within range for a lot of incubation processes. The shell's composition still refused to match anything in her database. It registered as partially organic, partially crystal-like, and partially unknown. Radiation levels were stable. A faint electromagnetic field pulsed in time with the internal rhythm. "This is so far outside station protocol. I'm going to get spaced if anyone figures it out," she muttered, unable to wipe the grin off her face. Hours passed as she ran test after test, logging what she could. On one level, it was just another puzzle, a strange object with measurable properties and behavior. But on another, deeper level, she could feel how unusual this truly was. In all her years in space, she had never heard of anything like an egg that could survive vacuum, latch itself to a vessel, and maintain internal heat for days. She was in the middle of setting up a biosensor array when the pulsing changed. Up until that moment, the rhythm had been steady, like a slow, strong heartbeat. Now it quickened. The lights in the room seemed to dim as the glow from within the shell brightened, shifting toward a vivid blue-white shine. Megan froze, slowly turning to face the bench. The egg scales were trembling, expanding, and contracting in tiny movements like something inside was pushing outward. "No way," she whispered. "You are not hatching already." A thin crack appeared along the shell's side with a delicate, crystalline sound. The fracture glowed brighter at the edges, light pouring out into the room. Megan slammed her hand onto the emergency containment controls, sealing the workshop's bulkheads and switching life support to isolated mode. If this went wrong, at least the rest of New Horizon would be safe. The cracks spidered, branching out in patterns that reminded her of lightning across a stormy sky. Each new line leaked more brilliance. The pulsing had turned into a humming vibration that she could feel in her bones. Instinct told her to run for the emergency field emitter and slam the entire bench into stasis. Curiosity, and something softer, more irrational, rooted her feet to the floor instead. She grabbed a protective visor from a hook, slapped it over her face, and watched. With a sharp, ringing snap, the shell split. Fragments peeled away like petals, drifting into the air, still glowing. In the center of the shattered remains, curled in on itself, lay a creature that should have only existed in myths and fantasy games, not in a workshop on an orbital station. It was about the size of a cat, but everything about it screamed dragon in the most sci-fi way possible. A lean, serpentine body, covered in those same iridescent scales, but finer and more delicate now. For limbs ended in clawed appendages perfectly suited for grasping. A pair of translucent, membranous wings rested folded along its back. Its head was narrow and elegant, crowned by small ridges that hinted at future horns. And its eyes were huge compared to its face, faceted like a strange cross between reptile and insect, glowing faintly with swirling patterns of color. They opened slowly, focusing first on the ceiling, then on the scattered shell pieces, and finally on Megan. For a second, time stopped. Just her and the impossible creature staring at each other. A dragon, she breathed, a disbelieving laugh catching in her throat. You're some kind of space dragon. The hatchling tilted its head, considering her. Then it unfurled its wings in a sudden, graceful motion and pushed itself upright, standing on its hind limbs to get a better look at her. Tiny sparks of light chased across its scales. When it made a sound, it wasn't a growl or hiss, but a series of gently musical tones that vibrated in the air like notes from an alien instrument. Megan's rational brain went into overdrive. Unknown life form, unknown abilities, unknown threat level. This should have been the moment she triggered every safety protocol she had ever designed or broken. Instead, she found herself whispering, "Hey, I'm Megan. You pick a weird place to hatch, you know that." The dragon made another sound, this one higher, more questioning. It took a tentative step forward, claws clicking faintly against the workstation. Its eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Then something touched her mind. It wasn't words. Not exactly. More like a brush of feeling, a swirl of impressions that were clearly not her own. Confusion, curiosity, a sense of being out of place. And under all of it, a raw, aching hunger. Megan sucked in breath. Okay, that's new. You're in my head. That's totally fine. Totally normal. The dragon's head tilted again, as if assessing her reaction, and the mental impressions shifted, specifically focusing on that hunger. It was like standing in front of a starving person in a food court, except the mental image it projected wasn't of solid food. It was of swirling energy streams, lit currents in storm clouds, lightning threading through gas. You don't eat food, she realized slowly. You eat energy. The hatchling chirped, and the sense of yes came through, clear and bright. Megan glanced around the workshop. She definitely didn't own any space dragon chow. What she did have was a stash of power cells for equipment testing. Before she risked sacrificing her best generators, she tried something simple. She tore open an emergency ration bar and held it out in one gloved hand. I know you're probably going to hate this, but if we're going to be roommates, we might as well test the basics. The dragon leaned closer, nostrils flaring as it sniffed. It delicately pinched the bar with its claws, studied it as if it were a strange rock, and took the tiniest bite. For exactly half a second, it tried to chew. Then its entire expression crumpled into disgust. With a sharp, offended sound, it spat the mush onto the bench and retreated a step, projecting waves of revulsion that almost made Megan gag. Yeah, to be fair, those taste like recycled socks even by human standards, she said. Okay, no solids. Let's try something more your style. On the far side of the room sat a portable generator she used when she didn't want station systems logging her experiments. It hummed quietly, loaded with a respectable charge. Megan hesitated, then shrugged. Fine, she said, but if you blow this up, we're going to have a serious budget problem. Before she could even unplug it, the dragon solved its own problem. It flowed off the table, landing on the floor with a smooth motion, and padded over to the generator. Placing one clawed forelimb on the housing, it closed its eyes. Electricity leapt. Megan's hair prickled as tiny arcs of visible energy crawled along the generator's surface and then flowed, like water finding a drain, into the dragon's body. The creature's scales flared brighter, one after another, until it glowed like a tiny living star. The musical sound it made this time was unmistakably one of delight. The generator's status panel dropped from 90% charge to 20 in a matter of seconds. Hey, Megan exclaimed, hurrying over. That's my backup power, you little thief. The dragon pulled its claw away obediently, eyes bright and satisfied. It projected a mix of gratitude, happiness, and a faint apology. She could almost feel it try not to take more than it needed. Megan sighed. All right, now we know what you eat. Energy. A lot of it. Great. You're adorable and expensive. The hatchling turned back toward her and bounded forward with surprising agility. Before she could step back, it climbed lightly up her leg, then her torso, and curled itself across her shoulders. Its tail wrapped loosely around the back of her neck for balance. It was warm, not uncomfortably so, but like wearing a living scarf that hummed faintly with power. The mental connection between them sharpened, bringing with it a flood of impressions. Trust, curiosity, an echo of her own face reflected through alien perception. A strange, glowing thread representing connection. "You're really just going to sit there," she said softly, reaching up to touch its neck with one cautious finger. The scales felt smooth and faintly buzzing, like touching the casing of a shield generator on low output. "Okay then, guess I'm a dragon perch now." The dragon gave a soft, chiming sound that somehow felt like laughter. By the end of that first day, Megan had learned several important things. First, the hatchling seemed to be bonded to her. It followed her every step around the workshop, either riding her shoulder or gliding from surface to surface with short bursts of wing power. It reacted strongly when she left the room, its mental presence tugging at her until she returned. Second, communication was possible, not with spoken words, but with images and emotions that got clearer the more time they spent together. When she thought of the word "you" and pointed, the dragon projected a sense of identification, a feeling of self, along with an image of bright, swirling energy within a shell. It didn't have a name, not in any way her human brain could easily interpret. "Nova," she decided finally, looking at the way its scales lit up whenever it fed. "You're like a little star." "Nova." The hatchling responded with a bright pulse of approval. The name settled into their connection like a solid point of reference. Third, Nova was growing. Fast. Over the next 2 days, in between stolen maintenance jobs that she used as excuses to access certain tools and power supplies, Megan watched the dragon double in size. Its wingspan went from just under a meter to almost 2. Its movements became more coordinated, its leaps more controlled. The workshop, which had once felt spacious, started to feel like it was built for something much smaller than a rapidly growing space dragon. That was when the problem she'd been ignoring finally caught up with her. An alert blinked at the corner of her main display. She'd set up a tap on station security feeds long ago, mostly to avoid surprise inspections. Now, a new directive flashed across her screen. "Attention all personnel," the automated voice intoned. "Report any anomalous power usage, unexplained energy drains, or irregular load spikes immediately. Unauthorized energy consumption is under investigation." Megan stared at the message, then slowly turned to look at Nova, who was happily hovering in midair, practicing short flight bursts between rafters and workbenches. "Oh, that's not good," she muttered. Nova drifted down to perch in front of the screen, eyes tracking the scrolling text. Concern and awareness flickered across their link. The dragon might not understand human language in full detail, but it definitely recognized the concept of being hunted for energy use. "We've been careful," Megan said, more to herself than anyone. "I've been routing as much as I can from my own allocations. I staggered the generator charges. But you're hungry." Nova projected apology and worry, along with images of vast storm clouds and endless lightning. The impression of home. It wasn't just about food. It was about belonging somewhere that could sustain what she was. "You're from there," Megan whispered, glancing at the live feed of Pro and IV's roiling atmosphere on one of her secondary screens. "From the upper layers. That's why you eat like a thunderstorm." The dragon sent back an image so strong it made Megan's knees weaken. Not just the gas giant as seen from orbit, but the inside of its storms. Rivers of light through colored clouds. Shapes moving within them. Vast and graceful. Others. A whole species. Megan swallowed hard. "You're not alone." Nova's answer came with mixed emotions. Joy at the thought of her people. Fear. Sadness. A drifting image of her egg, separated from a cluster of others, rising alone. "You got separated," Megan realized. "You were supposed to stay in those clouds, not ride some freighter up here." The thought of simply handing Nova over to station science flashed through her mind and was rejected immediately. The dragon responded with a projection of cold walls, harsh lights, strangers cutting and probing. It made Megan's stomach twist. Yeah, no, she said firmly. I've seen what happens to unknown life forms when bureaucracy gets involved. You're not ending up as a lab specimen. She leaned back against the console, rubbing her forehead. So, our options. Option 1. Hide forever and hope security never decides to sweep this sector. Not realistic. Option 2. Shove you out an airlock and hope you somehow find your way home by yourself. Absolutely not happening. Option 3. She looked at the half-disassembled shuttle in the far corner of the workshop. It was an old maintenance craft she'd been slowly rebuilding from salvage parts, more as a hobby than anything. Its frame was sound. The propulsion system could handle short jumps. Life support was functional-ish. Nova followed her gaze and immediately projected an image, the shuttle flying, Pro and 4 growing larger, the two of them inside together. Of course that's what you want, Megan said, half laughing, half terrified. Steal a shuttle, break every regulation on this station, and fly into a gas giant with an alien dragon as my co-pilot. Absolutely brilliant. The dragon's mental voice filled with determination, hope, and beneath that, something else, willingness to let her choose. If Megan decided not to do it, Nova would accept it. But the longing in that projected vision of home was almost painful. She thought about her life. The endless cycle of broken machines, patched conduits, and worn-out filters. The safe, small orbit she'd made for herself around reliable work and modest quarters. The way her heart had leapt when she saw the egg, and again when it had cracked open. Was she really going to choose safety over this? Megan exhaled slowly. All right, Nova. If we're doing this, we do it right. We'll need parts, fuel, food. Well, food for me, and a plan to get out of here without station security turning us into space dust. The dragon's joy exploded across their connection so strongly that tears pricked her eyes. It leapt into the air, circling the workshop in a dizzying spiral of glowing wings before landing on her shoulder again. Yeah, she said, wiping at her face with the heel of her hand. Don't get too excited yet. We still have to steal a shuttle from under the noses of an entire orbital station. No pressure. But as she opened a new planning file and began compiling a list of what they'd need to pull this off, Megan realized something. For the first time in years, she wasn't just fixing other people's problems. She was choosing her own, and the path she'd chosen led straight into the storm. If you're still following this sci-fi story about the mechanic and the space dragon, drop a quick "still here" in the comments and tell me what you'd name your own space dragon. It really helps the channel and gives me ideas for future stories. Megan had pulled off risky repairs, illegal modifications, and quiet rule-bending in her life, but planning an actual escape from New Horizon with a growing alien dragon as her co-pilot? That was new, even for her. The next 2 days turned into a secret double life. On the surface, she was still Megan Brooks, reliable station mechanic, the person people called when a pump wouldn't run or a sensor refused to cooperate. She took official jobs, logged her hours, snapped at coworkers who asked too many questions. Everything perfectly normal. Underneath that thin layer of normal, she moved with purpose. Her requests for assignments in the outer maintenance sectors suddenly increased. She volunteered for inspections near power junctions and rarely visited storage bays. She offered to clean up old junk from equipment lockers that most engineers had forgotten existed. Bit by bit, she built a stockpile in Sector 12B, a compact life support regulator scheduled for decommissioning, a set of fuel injectors not worth refurbishing, navigation relays, emergency rations, water reclamation cartridges, tangled bundles of wiring and cable, all quietly rerouted into her private workshop. Nova watched everything with keen interest. Whenever Megan trudged back through the sealed hatch with her arms full, the dragon would flutter down from a ceiling beam or glide over on shimmering wings, projecting approval and excitement through their bond. "You are way too happy about us committing 15 kinds of felony," Megan muttered one evening, dropping a crate onto the floor beside the half-finished shuttle. Nova responded with a bright flare of amusement and an image of them soaring through open space, the station shrinking behind them like a discarded shell. That predictive vision carried so much hope that Megan couldn't stay annoyed. Yeah, I know, she sighed. Freedom storms home. I get it. The shuttle itself had once been a standard maintenance craft built for short-range trips around the station's exterior. Its hull plating was scuffed and patched. One wing had been replaced with a mismatched model. Megan had gutted it months earlier just to see how much she could upgrade with salvage parts. Now, every piece she had previously installed got reevaluated with fresh urgency. Life support systems got reinforced beyond their original specs. She installed redundant filters and grafted in extra oxygen storage tanks, then rigged the environment controls so she could override them manually if Pro and IV's upper layers tried to overwhelm the system with weird gas chemistry. The engines received an equally obsessive treatment. She replaced worn-out coils with ones scavenged from a newer shuttle, then fine-tuned the fuel mix regulators to squeeze as much thrust as possible from their limited reserves. The craft was never meant for long-distance travel, but she planned to push it as far as it could go. Nova helped in ways no human assistant could. The Dragon's telekinetic ability developed so quickly that by the third day of their preparations, she could hold tools in midair, rotate components precisely, and slide them into places human hands couldn't reach. Megan lay half inside a wall panel, trying to wrestle a stubborn cable through a tight conduit, when the cord simply lifted itself and snaked into place like it had grown there. She wiggled out and blinked at the now perfectly seated connection. Nova perched above the open panel, eyes glowing, projecting a smug ripple of "You're welcome." "You know, if I'd had you years ago, my repair times would have been legendary," Megan said, half laughing. "And I would have been fired for unexplained productivity anomalies. Every night. Not that day and night meant much on a station. They pored over maps and readouts of Pro and 4. The gas giant filled the station's external observations like a living painting, ribbons of color swirling in patterns no one had fully charted. Science teams had long since categorized the densities and storm belts, but there were entire layers too turbulent, too dangerous for human craft to enter. Those were the layers Nova projected in her thoughts. She shared flashes of memory that didn't feel entirely like memories, more like inherited impressions. Vast currents of energy, shapes moving through luminous clouds, a sense of community woven from light and pressure. "That's where your people are," Megan murmured, staring at a sensor map that now felt criminally incomplete. Somewhere in there, in all that chaos. Nova breathed out a faint crackle of energy, scales shimmering. "Home," the dragon's mental voice whispered without words. As the shuttle grew more complete, the station grew more suspicious. The security bulletins she monitored began to include specific sectors. First, generalized warnings about unexplained power drains. Then, stricter limits on unauthorized generator use. Then, pointed mentions of old maintenance sections and decommissioned wings. On the fourth day, she watched a new alert scroll across her hijacked security console. Power audit teams will be inspecting inactive sectors for unauthorized taps and illegal modifications. All personnel are required to cooperate fully. Failure to report anomalous activity will be considered collusion. Megan's stomach nodded. "They're getting close," she told Nova, who hovered near the ceiling, wings barely moving as she rode invisible currents of air. The dragon drifted down, landing on the console, tail curling around one of the monitors. Nova projected an impression of ticking time, then an image of a station map with a bright line sweeping slowly toward their sector. "We don't have the luxury of a perfect launch anymore," Megan said. "We're going to have to fly with what we've got." The shuttle was almost ready. Engines operational. Life support functioning. Navigation partially fixed, at least enough to get them to the giant planet that took up half the sky. She still hadn't finished integrating the backup guidance system, but if she had to, she could fly manually. "We go now," Nova's mental tone urged, "or we lose the chance." She hesitated, instinct screaming for one more check, one more calibration. Then she remembered the way the dragon had looked when she projected home. Hopeful, terrified, determined. "Okay, Megan said. We leave tonight. Officially, Megan called in sick. Some kind of stomach bug, she reported to her supervisor with an excellently timed groan over the comm, probably that sent Stu from Deck 3. Her supervisor didn't question it. Station flu was a fact of life, and Megan had earned enough goodwill to take a day. Unofficially, she spent the next few hours in a blur of motion. She loaded what food she could carry, protein bars, freeze-dried meals, racks of water pouches, into the shuttle's cramped storage compartments. She secured toolkits, spare filters, and a portable med kit. Her own clothes and personal belongings fit into a single bag. She realized with a faint, bitter amusement that she had very little worth taking. Nova helped pack in her own way, levitating crates and sliding them into place while projecting small bursts of encouragement. When Megan nearly dropped a box of air cartridges from exhaustion, the dragon swooped down and caught it midair with a telekinetic nudge. Finally, with the preparations as complete as they were going to get, Megan sealed the workshop's main hatch and turned to the shuttle. Up close, the patched-together craft looked both heroic and ridiculous. Its mismatched panels wore different shades of gray. A fresh weld line along one wing still gleamed. The nose was slightly dented from some previous incident long before Megan had ever found it. Not exactly a sleek interstellar cruiser, she said, running a hand along the hull. But you'll fly, won't you? The shuttle's systems hummed in reply. Nova perched on the open ramp, wings half spread, eyes bright with anticipation. The mental impressions she sent were clear. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Megan took a deep breath and walked up the ramp. Inside, the cockpit was tight but familiar. 2 seats side by side, a bank of consoles ahead, physical switches mixed with touchscreens. She settled into the pilot's chair, fingers moving over the controls by instinct. Nova took the co-pilot's seat, curling her tail around the base and folding her wings neatly. Seat belts are kind of a joke for you, Megan said. Try not to punch yourself through the windshield if we hit turbulence. Nova projected a snort of amusement. A faint flicker of energy danced across her scales. Megan powered up the engines on low output. The subtle vibration transmitted through the seat, through the deck, into her bones. Every light on the console that needed to be green was green, or at least yellow in a way she understood and accepted. The only problem was the door. The shuttle sat inside a sealed maintenance bay. To open the exterior doors, she needed authorization from station control, a thing she absolutely did not have. Overriding the locks from the inside was possible, but it would trigger alarms that would light the security feeds like a flare. She had hoped to find a clean workaround before leaving. She hadn't found one. Through their link, Nova reached for her attention and sent an image of solid metal doors dissolving into dust. The same vision had surfaced before, half-formed. Now it came through with sharper intent. You want to blow the doors open? Megan asked. Pretty sure that'll show up on the sensor logs, too. Another image, more refined. Not an explosion, not force, more like unraveling. Metal coming apart at the smallest scales, not violently, but as if it had been told it didn't need to hold together anymore. Energy manipulation, Nova's mental tone whispered. The same thing she'd done with small objects in the workshop, scaled up. That's reinforced alloy, Megan said quietly. Those doors are designed to hold against debris impacts and vacuum differentials. Nova's eyes glowed brighter. Her wings unfurled, pressing gently against the sides of the cockpit. The air gained a faint charge, hairs rising along Megan's arms. I really wish we had time to test this on something that isn't our only exit, Megan muttered. But time was the one thing they didn't have. Her hacked security feed chimed from the small side screen she'd docked to the console. A squad of security officers had entered Sector 12, the section right next to her hidden domain. Their heat signatures marched steadily closer. We're out of options, she said. Do it. Nova closed her eyes. The temperature in the cabin rose, not dangerously, but noticeably. Energy gathered around the dragon, lights streaming from between her scales until she was almost too bright to look at. The consoles flickered as the ambient field spiked, but the systems held. Megan watched through the forward viewport as the maintenance bay doors appeared on the external camera feed. The heavy slabs of metal gleamed dully in the reflected station lights. A brilliant arc of white-gold energy leapt from Nova's outstretched claws, passing straight through the shuttle hull as if it weren't even there. On the camera feed, it struck the doors. There was no explosion, no melting. The metal simply changed. 1 second it was solid. The next, it fractured into trillions of fine particles like shimmering dust. The dust swirled outward, carried away by the pressure difference, revealing the blackness of space beyond and the distant curve of Proen 4. In the same instant, alarm screamed inside the maintenance bay. Red lights strobed to life. The station's emergency systems recognized a sudden breach and began sealing off surrounding corridors. Security's heat signatures on her screen broke into a sprint. "Oh, that's our cue," Megan said through gritted teeth. She shoved the throttles forward. The shuttle launched. For a heart-thumping moment, the small craft squeezed through the jagged opening, brushing past drifting motes of disintegrated metal. Megan's stomach dropped as they left the relative safety of the bay and emerged into open space. Behind them, through the rear cameras, she saw pressure doors slamming shut along the access tunnel. A handful of figures in emergency suits spilled into the ruined bay, weapons drawn and too late to matter. "Sorry, New Horizon," she whispered. "You were home, but she needs hers." Nova sagged back in her seat, the glow from her body dimming to a faint shimmer. She projected exhaustion and a twinge of embarrassment at how much energy she just burned, but also satisfaction. She'd done it. They were free. "Rest," Megan told her. "I've got this part." She oriented the shuttle toward the massive planet that dominated the view. Proen 4 filled half the forward port, a swirling marble of blues, greens, and purples. It storms like scars across its atmosphere. The gas giant had always felt distant to her before, a pretty screensaver. Now, it was their destination. She engaged the main engine burn. The shuttle's vibration intensified, but the systems held within their safe margins. The station shrank behind them, its ring of lights becoming just another point in the dark. For a while, the only sound in the cabin was the soft hum of the engines and the occasional beep of a status update. Nova dozed, curled in the co-pilot's chair, her breathing slow and even. Megan kept her hands steady on the controls, occasionally tweaking the course corrections the half-functioning navigation system suggested. Her surface thoughts drifted as the kilometers fell away. She thought about her life on New Horizon, the endless repairs, the familiar faces, the worn routines. The way she'd always felt like she was waiting for something without knowing what. She thought about the egg on Reeves' hull, how close it had come to being scraped off as unknown hazard and vented into space. She thought about Nova curled on her shoulders like a living piece of starlight, humming faintly as she slept. "Whatever happens next," she murmured, "no way I'm going back to normal after this." Time blurred into engine noise and minor course corrections. Proen 4 grew larger and larger, until it filled the viewport with dizzying detail. Swirling storms with eyes big enough to swallow continents. Ribbons of cloud stretching thousands of kilometers. Lightning flickering within layers too deep for her sensors to pierce. As they closed in, Megan shifted to a lower trajectory, skimming toward the upper atmospheric bands the station's charts labeled with neat numbers and danger ratings. "Okay," she said, glancing over at Nova, who had awakened and now watched the planet with wide, shining eyes. "This is where we find out if my modifications were enough and if your sense of direction is better than station data." Nova projected a wave of calm that steadied her heart. Along with it came a clear, mental tug. Down, forward, toward a specific region in the churning clouds. An invisible beacon, calling her home. "Guidance by Dragon," Megan said with a crooked smile. "That's new." As they dipped into the outermost layers of the gas giant's atmosphere, the shuttle shuddered. Sensors screamed warnings as the external pressures and temperatures shifted violently. Megan gritted her teeth and rode the turbulence, making rapid adjustments to keep them from tumbling. The skies around them transformed from black dotted with stars to hazy color. Thin wisps of gas brushed the windows, then thickened into proper clouds. The hull creaked but stayed within its tolerances. Lightning flickered in the distance, distant at first, then closer, brighter, until flashes of energy crackled through the surrounding air like veins. Nova's excitement radiated through the cabin, pushing back the instinctive fear of flying a fragile metal shell through a storm that could rip it in half. Then the ship's proximity alarms went wild. Multiple energy sources. Approaching fast. No identifiable mass signatures. Patterns unlike anything in the database. Company, Megan muttered. Her hands tightened on the controls. Tell me these are your people, and not some atmospheric shredders that like chewing on metal. Nova rose from her seat, wings spreading inside the cramped space. The dragon pressed her foreclaws against the viewport, eyes blazing with light. The mental flood that crashed into Megan's mind was overwhelming. Recognition, joy, nervousness, something like family magnified 1,000 times. Shapes emerged from a storm. At first, Megan thought they were just anomalies in the lightning, knots of brighter energy where currents intersected. But they moved with purpose. 7 distinct entities glowing like stylized comets, each trailing iridescent wakes through the gas. They weren't solid bodies, but swirling, organized patterns of light and force. They circled the shuttle in graceful arcs, as if examining it from every angle. Every system in the craft surged, then went dark. Panels blinked out. Engine hum fell silent. Life support alarms flickered and died. For one frozen heartbeat, the shuttle became just a powerless shell tumbling in a storm too vast to comprehend. But Megan could still breathe. She realized, with a jolt, that she wasn't falling. Something held them suspended, as if cradled in an invisible hand. Pressure stayed stable. Air remained breathable. Outside, the storm raged and danced, but inside, they floated in a bubble of calm. Nova pressed closer to the viewport and flared her wings, her body lighting up in response to the energy beings outside. Patterns pulsed across her scales, answering their movements with intricate rhythms Megan couldn't begin to decode. She's talking to them, Megan thought, while swallowing her fear. In her language, for several long moments, the shuttle hung there, a dark seed inside a sphere of light and storm. The alien entities and the young dragon exchanged invisible messages while the human sat in the darkened cockpit, very aware that her role had shifted from rescuer to guest. Then Nova turned to her. Trust, the dragon's mental voice whispered, strong and clear. Prepare. Prepare for what? Megan asked, but the answer arrived not as words, but as sensation. The shuttle's walls faded, not physically, not as metal tearing or glass breaking, but as if someone had turned down their importance. The boundary between inside and outside thinned until she could see the storm not just through the windows, but all around her. She felt the bubble of energy supporting them and understood on some instinctive level that it was being altered. The walls of the shuttle dissolved into translucence, like fog illuminated by lightning. Megan gasped and instinctively grabbed the sides of her seat, but her hands met neither metal nor emptiness. Instead, they pressed against a soft, humming layer of energy that shaped itself around her palms. Okay, she said shakily. When the name of every broken reactor coil is happening. Nova didn't respond with words. Instead, the dragon projected a feeling, gentle, steady, guiding. The sensation of being wrapped in a warm current. A reminder not to fight it. The energy bubble around them contracted slightly, embracing both of them in the space where the shuttle had been. Then the bubble shifted downward, slowly at first, then faster, accelerating until the colors of Pro and IV's atmosphere blurred into swirling bands. Outside, the gas giant storms writhed in impossible patterns. Lightning arced like glowing serpents. Clouds folded over themselves like ocean waves. The deeper they descended, the more the colors changed, from pale blues and purples to vibrant greens and shimmering golds. But none of that frightened Megan as much as the sensation of falling without weight. She wasn't strapped into a cockpit anymore. She was suspended in something alive. "Nova," she whispered. "If you tell me this is safe, I swear I'll believe you, but right now my entire body wants to scream." The dragon floated beside her, wings half unfurled, scales glowing with an inner luminescence that grew stronger the deeper they went. Nova touched her forehead gently with her snout. "Calm," the dragon projected, soothing the panic tightening Megan's chest. Together, layers of emotion followed. Trust, unity, a mental anchor in the storm rushing past them. Megan breathed deeply, still amazed she could breathe at all in this unnatural space, and try to let the fear loosen its grip. She had risked her freedom to bring Nova home. Whatever happened next, she wasn't backing out now. The energy beings, 7 of them, descended with them, forming a sphere of shifting light patterns around the bubble. Their movements looked choreographed, like dancers in a cosmic ballet. Each emitted a distinct color signature, some warm, some cool, all mesmerizing. As they reached a deeper layer of atmosphere, the pressure outside surged high enough that any normal shuttle would have been crushed like foil. The bubble responded instantly, strengthening, adjusting its structure. The air inside warmed, smelling faintly like charged ozone. Then, emerging through the haze ahead, Megan saw it. The nursery between states. At first, she thought they were approaching a structure, something large and floating. But the closer they drew, the less accurate structure seemed. It wasn't built. It wasn't grown. It simply was. A massive sphere composed of interwoven filaments of energy and matter, shimmering like a living aurora. It resembled a nest made from threads of light and translucent plates, plates remarkably similar to the shell of Nova's egg. Inside the sphere, forms moved. Some appeared solid, like young dragons in various stages of development. Some smaller than Nova had been when she first hatched, others already twice her current size. Some figures were humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Bodies formed from condensed energy shaped into arms, legs, torsos, and faces that rippled with subtle luminosity. The sphere shifted as they approached. Its outer layer parted like curtains of mist. The energy bubble, carrying Megan and Nova, floated gently through the opening. As they passed inside, Megan felt a subtle change, like stepping from one temperature into another, invisible but profound. The place had gravity now, soft, comfortable, holding her body like a supportive hand. The bubble dissolved, letting her feet touch a surface that felt both solid and fluid, like stepping onto warm glass. Nova landed gracefully beside her and pressed her wings against her back in a gesture that felt both protective and proud. Megan steadied herself, heart pounding. A figure approached. It walked. The walk wasn't quite right. Its movements were too smooth, too liquid, like a hologram that somehow had mass. Its form was humanoid, tall, elegant, and faintly glowing. Its eyes were twin swirls of energy, like miniature galaxies. When it spoke, its voice filled the space, not loud, not echoing, just present. "Welcome, Megan Brooks." Megan's mouth fell open. You know my name?" "We know what Nova knows," the being replied with a gentle tilt of its head. "And Nova has shared much." The being's form shifted subtly, features reshaping until, impossibly, it resembled Megan, but not quite. Like a reflection in water, familiar, yet distinctly alien. "I'm either hallucinating or this is the most surreal job site I've ever walked into," Megan whispered. The being laughed, a soft, chime-like sound that resonated in her mind more than in her ears. "You may call me Sarah. Names help your kind form interpersonal meaning." Nova projected a burst of warmth, recognition, respect, and comfort. Megan sensed that Sarah was someone of significance. Behind Sarah, newly hatched dragons chirped and glided through the air. Caretaker entities floated between them, adjusting their development spaces, offering guidance. "This," Megan breathed, turning in a slow circle, "this is a nursery." "A transition sphere," Sarah corrected softly. "A place between energy and matter, where young take form, where they learn, where bonds may be strengthened." Her luminous eyes focused on Nova with warmth. "And where Nova was meant to return." Nova pressed her head gently against Megan's hip, projecting gratitude and something deeper, belonging. Sarah stepped forward. Your actions in bringing her here have not gone unnoticed. You have earned the attention of our elders. Megan blinked. Great. I assume this is either really good or really bad news. Sarah's face, if it could be called a face, shifted in an amused ripple. They wish to speak with you both. The elders of light and storm. A doorway appeared in the nursery wall, not by opening, but by simply ceasing to be opaque. Sarah led the way. Nova followed. Megan swallowed hard and walked after them. Beyond the threshold lay a vast chamber filled with swirling atmospheric currents and colossal formations of energy. It felt like stepping into the core of a star rendered gentle. 7 enormous entities floated within. Unlike the caretakers, these beings didn't adopt humanoid shapes. They were pure energy, vast, complex, magnificent. Patterns pulsed across their forms like language written in light. Megan felt their attention turn toward her and almost collapsed under the weight of it. Not hostility, not danger, just comprehension, like being fully seen for the first time in her life. A resonance filled the chamber, deep, layered, beautiful. Mechanic from the metal shell, one elder intoned. You brought one of ours home. The voice reverberated through her bones. I didn't know what she was at first, Megan said, her voice trembling. But once I did, I couldn't just let her be lost. Compassion, another elder observed, its voice soft but vast. And courage, a third spoke. Nova has bonded with you. A rare event, rare and powerful. Nova stepped forward, wings glowing with pride. She projected her feelings clearly, respect for Megan, love, loyalty, connection. Megan blinked rapidly as warmth surged into her mind. She felt Nova's memories of her. Every moment since the hatching, from fear to trust to a deep bond she hadn't fully understood. She's my friend, Megan whispered. My partner. A ripple of approval moved through the elders. This bond opens doors, an elder said. Possibilities we had not imagined. Sarah stepped beside Megan. Your understanding of matter and machines is unique among our observers. Combined with Nova's energy manipulation, it creates a bridge between worlds that has never existed. Megan frowned. A bridge? I'm a mechanic, not a physicist. You are more than your title, an elder replied. Across the chamber, a suspended shell-like object materialized, half energy, half solid. It glowed faintly. Sarah gestured. For generations, we have traveled the cosmic currents as energy beings. But material species, humans, for example, cannot. Not without great cost. Megan's breath caught. You're talking about faster-than-light travel. Instantaneous, corrected an elder. If matter could be guided safely through the currents. Understanding bloomed in Megan's mind. You want Nova and me to help you build something, she said slowly. Something that merges your abilities with physical technology. Exactly, Sarah said, and her luminous face softened. You have already experimented with hybrid tools. You have intuition, creativity, instinct. I fix broken things, Megan said weakly. Then fix the distance between worlds, an elder said simply. Her legs almost gave out. Nova pressed against her side, projecting fierce support. Megan inhaled sharply as something shifted inside her. A spark, a thread of energy along her nerves. For a moment, she could see faint patterns overlaying the world. Currents, flows, structures of force she hadn't been able to perceive before. What? She whispered. What was that? A result of prolonged exposure to Nova's energy, Sarah said. Your physiology has begun adapting. Slowly, safely. You are becoming sensitive to the forces we manipulate. Megan stared at her own hands, stunned. I'm changing. Evolving, said an elder. If you choose to continue. The invitation. Sarah stepped closer and placed a luminous hand over Megan's chest. Not touching physically, but touching something deeper. You may stay with us, she said. Learn, grow, work with Nova to build the first vessel that can shift between states. A craft that could one day carry humans across the stars in moments. Megan swallowed. And if I refuse? Then nothing is taken from you, Sarah assured. You will be escorted safely to human space. No harm, no coercion. Nova turned to face Megan fully. The dragon's large eyes shimmered with emotion, hope, fear, longing. She projected her feelings clearly. She wanted Megan to stay. But she would not ask. She would not force. The elders fell silent, waiting. Megan thought about New Horizon, her cramped quarters, her monotonous work, her lonely meals in the commissary. She thought about finding that egg on the hull. She thought about Nova learning to fly in her workshop, about the escape, about the storm that had swallowed them both. She thought about the impossible beauty around her. I always said I wanted something more than fixing other people's broken junk, she whispered. Nova's wings trembled. Megan took a breath that felt like stepping into a new life. I'll stay, she said. I'll help you build it. The chamber filled with sound, 7 overlapping voices of approval, a cosmic chorus that made her hair rise and her heart race. Nova leapt into the air, spiraling around her in pure, radiant joy. Sarah extended her hand. Then come. Your new path begins today. Megan stepped forward, feeling Nova's warmth at her side and the elder's light before her. Her old life faded like the view of the station as she'd flown away. Ahead lay a future she never could have dreamed of. A mechanic and her space dragon, changing the fate of 2 worlds. Time inside the transition sphere around Pro and 4 didn't flow the way time did on a human station. There were no artificial day-night cycles, no standard 12-hour shifts, no calendar pings reminding you of maintenance deadlines. There was only flow, projects beginning when they needed to, rest taken when minds grew tired, progress measured not by hours but by breakthroughs. 5 of Megan's years slipped by inside that atmosphere-spanning nursery and its connected research spaces. In that time, everything changed. Her body adapted to its new environment slowly but steadily. She still looked human in most ways, but her eyes reflected light differently now, catching faint glimmers that weren't visible to ordinary people. Sometimes, when she concentrated, she could sense energy flows the way she once sensed temperature or sound, a subtle awareness of invisible currents. Nova changed even more dramatically. The once cat-sized hatchling grew into a magnificent, full-grown dragon, her serpentine body long and graceful, her wings spanning the length of a shuttle. She could phase between physical form and pure energy almost at will now, her luminous shape threading in and out of matter like a fish through water. Their bond deepened with every shared experiment and long, drifting conversation. They no longer needed impressions alone. Their minds could trade structured thoughts, images, memories as clearly as spoken language, but faster, richer, layered. Megan, Nova would say without words, you're overcompensating the coils again. You're the one who blew out the last 3 prototypes. Megan would argue back. I don't see you writing the safety protocols. That interplay, half teasing, half serious, became the heartbeat of their work, building the first nexus. The elders had given them a challenge. Create a vessel that could safely take physical beings through the same cosmic rivers the Luminari used as energy. The first attempts were messy. Early test frames simply fell apart when touched by the Luminari's full power, molecular bonds shredding under forces they weren't designed to handle. Hybrid shells, half metal, half Luminari-grown material, resisted longer, then cracked in unpredictable ways. Some models held together, but scrambled any sensor they tried to install. Megan spent months floating beside failed prototypes in a dedicated research chamber, pushing herself along handholds while Nova hovered overhead, tail curled like a glowing question mark. We're trying to pour a river through a straw, Megan muttered after one particularly dramatic failure. A test frame had just dissolved into glittering dust the moment Nova fully phased around it. We're building the ship like a rigid object when it needs to be a partner. Nova's response came with images of Luminari bodies shifting seamlessly between shapes, adapting to currents instead of resisting them. What if the vessel doesn't fight the energy? She suggested. What if it rides it? The breakthrough came when they stopped thinking of the ship as something separate from the Luminari pilot. Instead of building walls and then trying to protect them, Megan said slowly, sketching rough designs in a floating interface, "We design a frame that's meant to be extended. You phase partially around it, and your own field becomes the protective layer." "A shell inside a shell," Nova agreed. "My energy is the buffer. The ship is the skeleton." That idea became Nexus 1. The prototype vessel looked elegant and alien. Its hull blended human alloys with luminari-grown material, smooth, iridescent panels that resonated lightly when touched. Its shape was more organic than any human ship Megan had seen, with flowing curves rather than hard angles, designed to distribute pressure evenly when the ship moved through warp space. Inside, the controls were as much for show as necessity. There were physical interfaces for human comfort: seats, harnesses, touch panels, manual overrides. But behind it all, at the very center of the craft, lay a crystalline node where a Luminari pilot could dock their energy and extend themselves around the hull. "You realize there's no way this passes any standard safety inspection," Megan joked the first time she floated into the cockpit, her hand trailing along the smooth interior walls. "No fire extinguishers, no emergency escape pods, no instruction labels." Nova's amusement fluttered through her mind. If it fails, there won't be enough left for an escape pod to matter. "Helpful," Megan replied. "Very reassuring. The first test would be simple. No passengers but her and Nova, no cargo, no complex destinations. Just a jump from the Pro and 4 nursery to a safe point in deep space nearby and back." The elders observed, their massive energy forms coiling around the research chamber like watching constellations. Sarah stood by Megan's side as she checked the last diagnostics. "You don't have to do this," Sarah said, her voice soft but steady. "You could step out. Let one of us take the human position." Megan shook her head. "We designed it together. I'm not letting Nova do this alone." Nova's mental voice glowed with appreciation. "We made this as one. We'll test it as one." Megan settled into the pilot's seat, adjusted the harness straps around her shoulders, and placed her hands on the embedded contact surfaces. Lights shimmered along the console as the ship recognized her biometrics. Nova flowed forward in a bright stream of energy, condensing around the crystalline node. When she bonded with the interface, the entire ship pulsed like a living thing taking its first breath. Systems lit up one by one. Hull resonance, stable. Energy field, aligned. Phase alignment, ready. "You know," Megan said, a crooked smile on her lips despite the tension twisting her stomach, "for all the crazy stuff I've done in my career, this is the first time I've willingly sat in something that might turn me into a smear across reality." Sarah's hand, a shimmering construct of light and intent, rested momentarily on her shoulder. "You are not alone. Ready?" Nova asked. Megan's pulse hammered in her ears. "Do it." The world shifted. Not in the way that engines normally shifted it. Not like acceleration, inertia, or the turbulence. It shifted like someone had reached out and twisted the fabric of existence itself. The research chamber vanished. Space folded in on itself. For one dizzying instant, Megan felt both everywhere and nowhere. Then there was somewhere else. The stars outside the viewport were different. Same universe, different arrangement. She didn't feel motion, just a discontinuous jump from one location to another. Her stomach rolled in protest, but she breathed through it. Internal systems remained stable. The hull hadn't cracked. The energy fields held. "We did it," she whispered. Nova responded with a triumphant flare of joy so strong it made Megan laugh out loud. Getting back was easier. The second jump felt less like a blind leap and more like stepping through a door they'd already opened. One moment, distant stars. The next, the familiar glow of the Luminari nursery floating within the storm clouds of Pro and 4. They hadn't just built a theoretical device. They had created the first Nexus vessel, a ship able to transform itself into an energy-encased bridge between stars. First contact, for real this time. Proving Nexus 1 worked within Luminari territory was just step one. The elders wanted more. "Your people must be brought into this carefully," one elder said during a later council, its voice resonating like layered bells. Too quickly, and they may break themselves with the power we offer. Humanity tends to sprint before we learn to walk, Megan admitted. We invent things, then argue about what they mean while they're already being used. Sarah chose 2 human representatives, carefully approached through subtle contact over time. One was Dr. Eliza Cooper, a physicist specializing in exotic energy fields. The other, Dr. Marcus Dean, worked with interstellar navigation and had a reputation for being stubbornly curious. Their arrival at the nursery, escorted in a protected capsule, was cautious but open-minded. They gaped at the inner sphere, the dragons, the Luminari caretakers, and especially at Megan. "You're alive," Eliza said slowly when she recognized her. "You vanished from New Horizon years ago. People thought you died in some accident." Megan shrugged. Close enough. I found a dragon egg instead." Marcus stared at Nova with an expression somewhere between terror and adoration. That's the egg." Nova lowered her head politely, projecting a warm greeting. Megan watched their eyes widen slightly as her presence brushed against their minds. "That's Nova," Megan said. "She's not the egg anymore. She's the reason we're about to break every rule of space travel you've ever taught in your classes." The first human demonstration of the Nexus vessel took place in a space humans would consider neutral and safe, a carefully chosen region near Earth's orbit, far enough from traffic lanes to avoid causing panic, close enough to allow observation. Megan and Nova piloted the Nexus. Eliza and Marcus waited aboard a conventional research ship, instruments primed, hearts racing. "We'll make a short hop from our current position to the edge of your system," Megan explained over comms. "You record everything. Then we do it again with you on board." "On board," Marcus repeated faintly. "Inside that living fusion of alien dragon and energy shell." "You'll be fine," Megan reassured. "Probably." They watched the Nexus ship vanish. No build-up, no dramatic tunnel of light. One moment, it occupied space and time. The next, it wasn't there at all. Seconds later, a ping came through from the far edge of the system. Eliza's console confirmed it. The coordinates matched what would have taken their fastest human ship hours or days to reach. When the Nexus shimmered back into existence beside them, Eliza's hands were shaking. "This changes everything," she whispered. "Not if we use it recklessly," Megan said. "That's why there are rules." And so the slow, careful rollout began. A new era. Over the next decade, Nexus travel reshaped everything. At first, it was limited to small-scale missions, scientific expeditions to uncharted systems, humanitarian aid to distant colonies, emergency evacuations from failing habitats. Each Nexus vessel required a willing Luminari pilot and a trained human partner. It wasn't just a machine you could copy and mass-produce. It was a relationship, a collaboration. News broke slowly. Humanity learned, piece by piece, that they were not alone, that ancient, energy-based beings had been watching from storm clouds and nebulae, quietly studying. That one of those beings had hatched on an orbital station, bonded with a mechanic, and dragged the entire galaxy toward a different future. Some people reacted with awe, some with fear, some with reverence. But over time, as more Nexus crews formed, pairs of humans and Luminari choosing to work together, the shock gave way to something deeper, a new sense of scale. Stars didn't feel impossibly far anymore. They felt reachable. The Academy in orbit. 20 years after Megan first touched her hand to the mysterious egg on Reeves' freighter, she stood on the observation deck of a structure in orbit around Proan 4. It wasn't a station in the old sense. It was a hybrid construct built partly from human materials, partly grown by Luminari shaping. Corridors shifted gently to accommodate both physical and energy-based travelers. Training rooms could shift into pure energy arenas or standard grav classrooms with a flick of a thought. They called it the Nexus Academy. Here, prospective human partners trained alongside Luminari who had chosen to adopt more humanoid forms for easier interaction. Simulations taught them how to handle the intensity of direct mind-link connections, how to manage the physical strain of rapid crossings, how to respect the bond between pilot and ship rather than treating it like a tool. On the observation deck, translucent panels looked out over Pro and 4. Nexus vessels arrived and departed in gentle flashes of bent light, carrying travelers to hubs across different star systems. Megan stood with her hands clasped behind her back, watching one such ship vanish and reappear further out. "You still get that look?" a familiar voice said from behind her. She turned to find Eliza Cooper standing there, hair streaked with gray now, eyes still bright. Her uniform bore the emblem of the Interstellar Nexus Alliance, the joint human luminary group that governed the use of this incredible technology. "What look?" Megan asked. "Though I can't believe this is real look," Eliza said with a smile. "You'd think after 20 years, you'd be used to bending space like it owes you rent." Megan chuckled. "Yeah, well, I still remember patching air filters for a living. Some part of my brain expect to wake up back in that repair bay with a wrench in my hand and no dragon anywhere in sight." A warm pulse touched her mind. "Rude," Nova said, appearing beside her in a burst of soft light. Today, the dragon chose her physical form, coiling her long body along the deck with casual grace. Her wings folded neatly, but even at rest, she radiated a quiet power. "I'd say you're hard to miss," Eliza told Nova, reaching out to rest a hand against her neck. "Most dragons don't glow like a star when they breathe." Nova preened. "I'm not most dragons." Megan rolled her eyes affectionately. "Don't fuel her ego. She already knows she's special." "You both are," Eliza said. "You know that, right? The Alliance is basically built around the model you two created." The idea still felt surreal. Megan and Nova, once just a mechanic and a scared hatchling hiding in a forgotten wing of a space station, were now living symbols of everything the Nexus Alliance represented: cooperation, balance, careful sharing of power. They taught classes together now. Megan handled engineering, systems thinking, and the many creative ways things could go wrong in a hybrid vessel. Nova taught energy flow, mental discipline, and how not to accidentally fry your human partner's brain during a transition. After a quiet moment, Eliza asked, "Do you ever think about going back to New Horizon?" Megan looked down at the swirling clouds of Pro and 4. Somewhere out there, the orbital station still circled, though it had changed too, upgraded over the years by the Nexus-enabled supply runs and Luminari-inspired tech. "Sometimes," she said honestly, "but not to stay. That life feels like a previous version of me, like a backup file that doesn't quite fit anymore." Nova projected a bittersweet echo of that feeling. "Old shell," she framed it. "Useful once. Outgrown now." Megan smiled. "Exactly." A story retold. Later, in one of the Academy's lecture halls, a group of trainees settled into their seats as Megan and Nova took their places at the front. The room darkened. A holographic projection flared to life behind them, showing a stylized image: a tiny shuttle fleeing a ring-shaped station, a dragon wrapped protectively around its hull, a giant stormy planet looming ahead. "You all know the official version of this story," Megan began, leaning casually against the edge of the platform. "The historical summary you probably had to memorize for your entrance exams. The Brooks Nova event, first luminary human symbiosis, inception of the Nexus era." Groans and chuckles rippled through the crowd. "But today," she continued, "we're not doing the official version. Today I'm telling you how it actually felt. How it feels to have your entire life rerouted by something as small and simple as saying yes to a strange request." Nova settled beside her, wings folded, eyes glowing softly. On the hologram, an egg appeared, clinging to the hull of a cargo freighter. "It started," Megan said, "with a mechanic being bored and a captain being scared. And an egg that should have fallen back into the storms, but didn't." Images flickered. The repair bay, the EVA walk, her hand on the egg, the first pulse, the first crack of the shell. As she spoke, she realized something. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was a chapter in the shared history of two species. A myth kids would learn growing up on space stations and luminary nurseries. Not everyone would know the grease-stained details, but they would know the core of it. A human saw something unknown and chose curiosity over fear. A hatchling woke up in a place that wasn't home and reached for connection instead of attack. Together, they built something both of their worlds needed without having known it. Echoes across the stars. That night, back in her private quarters, if you could call it gently shifting space formed by luminary architecture quarters, Megan lay on a floating reclined platform, staring through a transparent panel at the stars beyond. Nova rested beside her, partly solid, partly phased, tail coiled lightly around Megan's ankle. You ever wonder what would have happened if Reeves had scraped your egg off the hull and tossed it? Megan asked, voice soft. Nova considered that, then sent a quiet image. Darkness, drifting, the pull of gravity, a delayed hatching in hostile conditions, maybe no hatching at all. Then a second image followed. Eyes meeting through cracked shell, workshop lights flickering, a human whispering, "You're some kind of space dragon." That second one glowed brighter. "I prefer the path we took," Nova said gently. "Yeah," Megan replied. "Me too." She thought of all the Nexus ships now leaping across the void, of humans and Luminari working side by side, learning new ways of thinking, of the worlds that would be saved by quick aid, the discoveries waiting in unexplored systems, the dangers they'd face together. "Do you think they'll keep choosing the right thing?" Megan asked. "Or are we handing humanity a tool we'll someday regret?" Nova didn't respond immediately. When she did, it wasn't with reassurances but honesty. Some will use it selfishly. Some will use it wisely. Some will try to use it to control others. Some will use it to help strangers. That is how your kind has always been. Megan huffed a laugh. "Comforting, but now they will not face their choices alone," Nova added. "They have us, and they have stories. Stories shape decisions." Megan smiled, watching a distant Nexus vessel flicker in and out of visibility as it shifted states. "Then I guess we better keep telling this one," she said. "We will," Nova promised. "Together."